why don't I just do a roll call?
Sure.
Shall we do that? Robin?
Here.
Mona?
Here.
Richard?
Here.
Judy Bird?
Here.
Can someone mute their phone, whoever that is that's getting a lot of background noise? Gabrielle? Gabrielle Fialkoff? Okay, Joan?
Here.
Jackie?
Here.
Beverly?
Here.
Deirdre?
Here.
Sally Singer? Sally Singer? Sally Haas?
Here.
Okay. So I think everyone except Gabrielle Fialkoff and Sally Singer are on the call. Is that correct?
That's my count, yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
great.
Bob Savage.
Hi.
Oh, Bob,
Hi.
thank
Hey,
you.
Bob.
Great.
Hi, Sally Singer.
Oh, hi, Sally. Okay, great.
Hi.
Good morning, Sally.
Hi.
All righty. So
Miss Gabrielle.
Gabrielle, I think, is the only person who's not on the call. So are we live?
Not yet. If you want, I can tell them to get started.
Yeah.
All right.
Steve,
Yes.
do we have Sherry?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, good. Okay.
Good morning, Sherry.
Good morning.
It's hard to get over the idea that, Joyce, that you were not in the same room as Sherry. It's, you know, I guess I made
Right.
that assumption. I get it.
I'm having a hard time with it myself.
Yeah, exactly. So, Steve, let us know when that's done, okay?
Okay, I'm looking for him to respond right now. Okay, we're on.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is Liz Peak, Chair of the Board of Trustees. Welcome, and I want to start this unusual session by, first of all, extending my sympathies and concern for every person involved with FIT and the board, hoping you and yours are safe and well, and just wishing you all the best during this really difficult time. And secondly, I want to congratulate Joyce, Dr. Brown, and all the administration, all the faculty for moving FIT so rapidly to an online presence. I think that must have been, as I think Joyce referred to it, as a Herculean task. I'm sure it really was just exactly that. All over the country, people are trying to do this, and not so many institutions are doing it with such efficiency. So well done. And, you know, the students are obviously much better off for having made this move pretty quickly. So thank you to everyone who was responsible in getting that done. This morning, I think you all know that we are going to first convene the Student Housing Corporation Board, which is now being done. There is no public session, so we're going to have a presentation of the budget for the Student Housing Corporation, and then we have 3 action items to vote on after Sherry makes her presentation on the budget. Then we will adjourn, and then we will recommence and reopen as the Board of Trustees. So with no further ado, Sherry, I think it is in your court.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair Peak. So I want to reference 2 documents that you all should have in front of you. One is it's page 8 of your board book, which basically is a one-page overview of the proposed operating budget for the Student Housing Corporation for fiscal year 2021. I draw your attention to this at a very high level, just to point out this probably is the first time in your tenure on the board that you have seen red ink and literally red ink in our presentation. And you will see that in our the column that is headed year-end projections, we are estimating a refund or a rebate of about $7.1 million in rental income that is going to students because we asked students to vacate the residence halls on March the 31st. We think that
Sherry.
Yes.
Sherry, could I interrupt you a second? Could
Yes.
everyone put their phones on mute if you're not speaking, please? You have incredible background. How about...
That's
there.
better.
That's
Thank you.
better. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. So the $7.1 million is probably this rebate value is probably on the high end. It is a number that we estimated when we first started trying to calculate this. And the last week we have gone, literally the people in the Student Housing Corporation staff have gone person by person to calculate, exactly what the rebate of those rental fees would be. So we think that we may come in a little bit lower than that, which will be all to the good. I'll also mention to you at the top of that page, there is again another red line that says medical staff housing. As you know, there has been some discussion with the state about the possibility of using some of our residence halls for the staffing of medical staff that the state was anticipating to bring in from out of state to support the hospitals, particularly the hospitals that were set up at the Javits Center this spring. We to date have heard nothing about actually housing medical workers. We planned for it and we continue to plan for it in terms of making sure that the facility is available to receive those workers should the space be needed. But at this point, we do not see that those medical staff are coming. So we obviously will remain prepared in case that becomes an issue in the future. But following down the column to the very bottom, you will see that what this means is that by the end of fiscal year 2020, we are projecting a deficit of about $5.3 million in the Student Housing Corporation. We are hoping, so it's not the full $7 million, largely because we had budgeted for a surplus last year. One of the things that we have been doing is trying to build up our surplus so that we might have an opportunity if we need additional residence hall space at some point in the future, we would have the reserves to be able to do that. And so that has served to mitigate the impact of the refund this year a bit. The other thing that we are in the process of applying for is the CARES Act, the federal stimulus package. There are dollars for higher education and there are dollars for nonprofit organizations. Because the Student Housing Corporation is a nonprofit organization, it is eligible for a portion of that stimulus act called Paycheck Protection Plan. And basically what we are doing is applying for 2.5 times our monthly payroll, which is the rules, in money through the Stimulus Act, which will also offset, if we receive it, there is an application process and we are in the process of that. We are expecting we will receive it, but it will probably be somewhere about $660,000 because it is committed basically to keep nonprofits functioning and able to, position so that they're able to pay their staff. So those numbers are not in here because we have not received them yet, but they may help to mitigate again this year the negative impact of the refunds that we have granted. The column that is in the yellow is what we are proposing to you in in terms of the budget for fiscal year 2021. And to go through some of the highlights of that, I would ask you to turn to another document that was sent to you. It's a PowerPoint document that is titled FY 2021 Residence Hall Budgets. You have seen this in prior years, and hopefully you will be able to pull it up as I sort of talk through that. So I'll pause for a minute, I guess, to see if there are any questions and to give people a chance to move to the other document.
Hey, Sherry, it's Richard. Quick
Yes.
question. Pending any funds that might come from the Stimulus Act, is there sufficient cash in the corporation to meet fixed costs?
Yes. So thank you, Richard. I should have said that. At the very bottom of the page you were just looking at, there is a note about what our reserves are, our fund balance. So we have about a $22 million fund balance currently. So we feel that we are in, fine shape for the end of this fiscal year. And also, as we plan, at the end of this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about contingencies for the future. As we look at what might happen over the next year, we also have a little cushion in the corporation to help us manage any kind of reduction in occupancy over the next year or so, if we see that happening in the fall.
Sherry, can I ask a question? Do we have any problems with our debt covenants because of this loss?
No. As long as we're able to continue to make our debt service payment, we should be fine. So we have made it for, obviously, the current fiscal year, and our budget for 2021 clearly, is a presentation that we will continue to make our debt service payments. Debt service is almost $10 million. And so it will be the first draw, on our budget, in the future, should we see any loss of a significant loss of revenue.
Okay, thank you. And I have one other question. In terms of the summer rentals, I know we had to keep all our dorms free for the medical, possible medical personnel. But if those people don't arrive, which it looks like they probably won't, is there any chance, I'm hearing from the big banks and stuff, that they're still going to go ahead with their intern programs probably beginning in August. Is there any chance of just renting out rooms for August?
So that's an excellent question. We have the budget that you see assumes no summer rentals.
Right.
However, I think that's because we weren't sure what was going to happen with medical workers, and we did not anticipate that there would be a demand, frankly, for housing.
Sure.
The problem that we have with August is that we try to use August, or a good portion of August, to get the residence halls ready for students to move in at the end of August. So our students, by August 20th or something, I don't know exactly what the date is this year, but it is usually the weekend before Labor Day, students will start moving back into the residence halls. And so if we're to house people even for a couple of weeks, then we have to clean after they leave and do any kind of repairs or whatever needs to be done. So we might be able to do a couple of weeks, but it's a pretty big effort, to bring in a lot of people and then take a lot of people out and clean up after them.
Thank you. Got it.
Okay. But, we should try to be open to all of those possibilities. If you all have gotten to the PowerPoint presentation, I will continue with that. The first slide, it's actually, the page number is 2, but the first slide plus the title page basically just reminds you of the size of our residence halls and when they were built. Our oldest residence hall, being Nagler Hall, houses about 300 students. And that goes up to our newest residence hall, which, as you know, is Kaufman Hall, which houses almost 1,100 students. So the number of students, the total beds anyway, in our residence halls are about 2,300. Some of those beds are dedicated to staff as well as to, RAs. So when we actually provide the rental income, the number that we use in terms of available beds is closer to 2,100. The next page will show you our historical occupancy rates. And what I would point out to you is we are pleased after a year, 2019 was a difficult year in terms of occupancy in the housing corporation. One of the reasons we believe, and we reported to you last year, is because of all the construction around Kaufman Hall. Kaufman Hall, which has always been a pretty popular space, all of a sudden became less so. And so, our occupancies decreased significantly last year to 92%. But this year we've had a real enthusiastic embrace of living in the residence halls. So our average occupancy this year has risen to 96%, which was really great. And I think that's also been helpful to us in terms of, making the budget a pretty robust, even before the refunds that we had to do this year. The next page of the document is basically the current year where we sit in New York City in terms of the rates that we charge students in the residence halls. And, we're in a place that we think is sort of good for us. We're clearly charging less than some of the large privates, New York University, the New School, PACE, but we are charging a little bit more than, oddly, Columbia, which always seems to have a very low rate, and one of the CUNY colleges, Queens College, we're about the same as City College, and we do charge more than colleges outside of New York City. SUNY Purchase, you'll see, has a pretty low charge. The next page, page 5, are the assumptions that are built into the budget that we're presenting to you. We are proposing a rental rate increase of about 3%. This is what we have been doing in recent years, and we are suggesting to continue with that increase. We believe other people will be doing that as well. We are budgeting our occupancy at a little bit lower than what we had this year. This year we were at 96%. We have budgeted it at 94%. That we feel like is conservative, but it's somewhere in between what we had the year before, the 91% or the 92% you saw before, and the 96%. So we think it is, for budgeting purposes, conservative budgeting purposes, a good place to land. As noted, based on the questions from Chair Peak, we have not included any rental revenues for the summer. We are proposing a meal plan rates increase almost 3%, not quite, 2.75%. When Aramark proposes their increases, they give us, cost of living and, what they are seeing, in terms of particularly the increases in food. And we believe the 2.75% is a reasonable increase based on that. I will remind you that basically the way we handle meal plans is we collect the money from the students and then we pay it to Aramark. So in some ways it's neutral to our budget because you will see it both on the revenue side and on the expense side. I've already talked to you about the rebates, the $7.1 million that we've budgeted in the current fiscal year, and also talked to you a little bit about the deficit we're projecting for the current year. And the $22 million in available unrestricted net assets that will help us, bridge this year, and that will still leave us with a little more than $15 million, which is a pretty healthy fund balance. It's about 50% of what our annual operating costs, a little bit less than 50%. And the advice that we've received through the years from SUNY is that a healthy fund balance is about 20%. This does not, though, address what our larger goal is, which is to try to accrue our fund balance so we're able to make some significant improvements, particularly in Nagler Hall. The next page, page 6, is an even more concise budget presentation than the one that we looked at before, and it really helps us center on what the highlights of the cost are. So you will see from a revenue perspective, our primary source of revenue is our rental revenues. As I mentioned before, our meal plan revenues are dollars in, but they're dollars out. You'll see exactly the same amount of money on the expense side down below. We have other commissions and revenues. We actually collect commissions from Aramark. They share a portion of the money they make in selling meal plans. And one of the reasons that the amount has gone down in 2020 is because we are also giving rebates to students in terms of their meal plans. So the commission revenue we're projecting to be less than it would have been otherwise. But again, this is projecting a healthy growth next year to $105,000. And then you see the student rebate, the COVID-19 student rebate is $7.1 million, and as a negative against the revenue. On the expense side, our operating expenses are basically paying for staff. As you will see, you have probably noted in the detail that you looked at before, paying for staff, paying for operating the buildings, both public safety and buildings and grounds, as well as utilities, and all that goes into keeping the buildings operated. It's the cost of IT services, all of those things we have lumped together in operating costs. The meal plan again in that. And then there you see the debt service number, almost $10 million in debt service. And then we every year try to do renovation projects and to maintain some sort of reserve. So all of the $4.9 million that you see proposed for 2021 is only, there is no reserve. It's only renovation projects that were proposed. We actually came up with this list before before March and fairly early in the year. So we are still holding on to these projects, but we'll need to make a decision very soon about whether or not we proceed with any of those projects, both based on what's happening in terms of construction in the city and whether or not we have the authority to move ahead with construction, but also based on what kinds of reserves and what kind of cash we will have in moving on those projects. So for 2021, as you will see, we are projecting a modest deficit, about $1.5 million.
This is Mona. Hi.
Hi,
question
Mona.
For you. What are do the terms of our debt allow for a refinancing opportunity in this environment?
Soon after 2008, the Kaufman Residence Hall opened in 2006, and in the 2008-2009 scenario, I will just tell you that all this debt is managed by DASNY, the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, and they refinanced a lot of their bonds, across the DASNY portfolio, including the Kaufman Hall bonds, and they did it like twice, 2 or 3 times, but I think it was twice actually during that period of time. And what the current covenants of the current bonds were that that would be the last refinancing. One of the things we have not done, but I think your question just emphasizes it's really important. We need to talk to DASNY about this and to see, what the opportunities might be for refinancing because of the unusual circumstances we're in right now.
Yeah. Thank you.
So the next slide is just a pie, and it tells you what you already know, but it shows it to you visually. All of our money mostly comes from the rentals, and then the food service I've already talked about. The expense assumptions, I think I have gone through this with you already. I'm looking to see. I don't think there's anything here that would be news to you, but if you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Again, a repeat of the expense budget, and then a pie on page 10 that basically shows you, the primary expense items that are in our budget.
Yep.
And then the last page is just a summary of some of the challenges from COVID-19. I think I've talked about this already, the challenge of offering, fairly large rebate, We are, concerned about 2021 occupancy. One of the things that will be clear to you is we are presenting to you a best case scenario kind of budget. I can talk in just a minute about some of the scenario planning that we are doing to look at what ifs. What if we don't have the level of occupancy that we're looking at? What if we're not, what if we're not able to open in the fall? Those are things we're having to start looking at and starting to plan for, so we can talk a little bit about those scenarios. The renovation projects, the next page, all of the projects are listed here. We come up with these projects in cooperation with the Office of Enrollment Management and Student Success and the residents' life staff, that operation. Probably the project on this list that is most critical is the one that is the most expensive, which is to replace the roof at Co-Ed Hall. And I think even if we decided we needed to cut back on some of these other projects, we would like to proceed with that. When we had our last local law 11 inspection, one of the things that architect observed is the leaking of the roof is going into the facade. It's sort of leaking down under the eaves and weakening the facade of Co-Ed Hall. And so the urgency of replacing that roof to stop the deterioration of the facade, it is pretty important. And I think even with any restrictions on construction in the city, that this is clear, it's a health and safety issue. So that's probably a project that we would need to proceed with. The rest of the projects are also important. Clearly, the co-ed shower drain riser replacement, we were having some leaks there last year. It would be really important to do that. But I think that we are going to have to balance this list against what the financial considerations will be as we look forward a little bit more to the fall. So that's the budget we're asking you to approve. I don't know if you want to talk for a minute about the way we are starting to look at contingency planning. Should we not get the kind of enrollment? Maybe we want to do that now.
Yes, please.
Sorry, just one question on that. Let's suppose that FIT can go back to having the students on campus and in the dorms, but with sort of social distancing kinds of requirements, meaning, I would guess, only one student per room. What would that look like? What kind of plan change would that be?
So that's a great question, and it's one of the things that we really have to look at. So what we've done in terms of contingency planning is we have really tried to sort of step down. What if we have 10% reduction in occupancy? What if we have a 25% reduction in occupancy? So 50% reduction in occupancy is where we think we would be. That may be a little optimistic if we have to do the social distancing thing. So we only, rather than having two people in a room, we would only have one person in a room. We do have some 3 people spaces, and we do have suites that would have 4 people, but we think that we could probably get away with in those suites that would have 4 people if in the individual rooms that everybody has, there's just one person in each of those rooms. So we've done this at 50%. So at a 50% loss, that would mean a loss of about $15 million, which is, pretty easy math. You see that we get about $30 million in revenue. We think probably what we would try to do is to close one of our residence halls, because that would reduce our operating expenses. So, and the obvious choice would be Nagler Hall, which is the older building and is the one that people don't want to be in. We would do that. We would have to obviously do no renovation projects if we thought we were going to be in that situation. We would have to draw and to save about $5 million. We would draw on our fund balance, we think, of about $5 million. we would, though, have as a priority paying our debt service. That would have to be, we think, the first thing that we do. But it also means that we, and this is related to the closing of Nagler Hall, we would have to reduce our operating expenses by almost $6 million, 5.8. We can balance between the fund balance. Maybe we can do a bigger draw on fund balance as opposed to a reduction in the operating expenses. But you know, I mean, clearly it's almost like a across the board kind of cut. So that's how we would come up to it.
Do our personnel contracts allow for any kind of reduction in personnel?
So, you know, the reduction in personnel is a very difficult discussion. In the residence halls, you know, we do have some flexibility, you know, in order to do that. You know, we might want to, we wouldn't have to reduce everyone, so we might reduce like RAs. For instance, or, you know, we would just have to look at it very carefully, Liz, and we would have to try to distribute it where students are still living. Like, if, for instance, if we close Nagler Hall, clearly we would not need staff there. We would also see that would allow us to reduce some of our public safety requirements, and it would allow us to reduce some of our buildings and grounds requirements in those facilities because they're not having to be cleaned as often. There are services that have to be maintained, like the boilers have to, you know, somebody has to monitor the boilers, those kinds of things. But we would look at every place that we could to continue to provide services to the students that are there, but reduce where we could just be more efficient.
Thank you.
This is Joan. I have some questions. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Joan.
A couple questions are, I don't think it's as simple. Maybe I'm not understanding something as putting one person instead of two in a room. Doesn't that also involve bathrooms, and doesn't that involve how much it's dining hall food and dining hall workers and how close are people? I don't how many kids you can have in a classroom.
I think if we were still doing if that is the rule, if we're having to do search, all of those things are impacted exactly, Joan. And I think your point, which is, you know, we're planning at a fairly high level at this point, but it will have to be get very granular very quickly. And so our general targets, if we say we want to, you know, save $6 million or whatever it is, $5.5 million in operating expenses, it's going to be hard when we start looking at it detail by detail, space by space. That's going to be the hard part.
And also, did we budget anywhere for whatever we have open, constantly replenishing in all public spaces, offering the free gloves and the sanitizers like the apartment buildings all have now? That's expensive.
Yeah, it is expensive. So we have been, before we left campus and what we have done in the past, you may remember H1N1, we have always offered the sanitation stations, the hand sanitizer stations, and we will continue to do that. And offering personal protective equipment, gloves, masks, those things. In the residence halls, we probably would not do that, but it would have to be discussed, I think. We would probably ask people to provide their own. Certainly in terms of face coverings, we would do that. But we will have to definitely provide it for staff. And one of our challenges has been, even with the staff right now, you know, we have people, public safety officers on campus. We have people who are cleaning Kaufman Hall right now. So we are having to provide that kind of personal protective equipment to them. And the issue is getting it. It's hard to get the stuff. So we were fortunate that the state of SUNY has been able to send us the sources. We actually got an email from SUNY yesterday saying contact your Office of Emergency Management in your counties in New York would be the case for us, and they should be able to help you, find sources for the equipment that you need. So we're following up on that.
And my other question, I'm sorry, I have a lot, but we have public spaces too that we've rented out, that we've used, events that bring in the outside public. Have we calculated not doing that for safety reasons in our budget? That maybe I missed looking at it.
Yeah, so that those issues are on the college side, and we are starting to do the same sort of contingency planning on the college side. One of the things you'll see the college budget in June. Okay. We usually present it to you in June, and what you will see there is we are, we obviously are taking a negative on the revenue side, all the rental income that we would have received from renting out any of our public spaces. We are not going to be able to do this year. But one of the things we're going to have to sort out in the next weeks, and sooner rather than later, is what will the implications of that be into the fall? Are we going to lose all of our rentals for the fall as well? And and what will that mean for us?
Thank you.
Sherry, it's Richard. As you do these contingency budgets, assuming step-down declines in occupancy, would you be looking to present that to the board for consideration or approval, or what's the next step here? Because frankly, I personally think that the 94% occupancy assumption is a little bit aggressive under the circumstance. So I think we're probably looking at some definite revisions here, and I think it would be useful to consider that perhaps or at least the issue discussed at the next board meeting.
I definitely think that's reasonable. I think that every day things are a little bit different. We talked about what to do here. We don't want to. Don't want to be Chicken Littles. We don't want to, the sky is falling, so we didn't want to come to you with that kind of presentation. But so what we thought we would do is present, this is how, like I said, this is the best case. By the board meeting in June, which is when we will be looking at the college budget, we should have more information. And you probably, from the college's perspective, will not see a best case. And I think that it is perfectly reasonable for the board to say we want an update also on the Housing Corporation budget at that time.
Great. Thank you,
Richard, I would also add that we are doing scenarios of 10% reduction, 25% reduction, which SUNY wants to take a look at and to approve. I know we will talk later about the college's operating budget, but with the passage of the state budget in April, the governor was given sweeping authority that he's never had before, which is essentially to be able to go in and reduce budgets as needed. And he's the determiner of what is needed. So we are really anticipating that there will be cuts. And I think all of these budgets are, just really subject to circumstances that, most of which are beyond our control, and we will have to continually come back and fill you in on what the impact is.
Yeah, I know that's absolutely right. Thank you.
So can we leave it? Can we leave it at the June meeting that you will come in with updated student housing the Student Housing Corporation updated numbers and contingency plans?
I think that the one thing that we would like, and I'm trying to get back to my board book, is approval of the resolution to raise the rates.
Yeah.
Because this is about communicating to students. The students need that information in order for them to apply for financial aid, frankly. which is one of the reasons we always do this budget earlier, is because we need students to be able to apply for their financial aid, to plan what their finances are going to be. So we ask you, I know the resolution asks for adoption of the budget, but the most important part of that resolution is adoption of the rates.
Yeah, I think we will move on adopting your budget and the fees, but I just think the consensus from what I'm hearing is that we need constant, obviously, revisions, and we just want to be kept current on what the numbers look like.
Absolutely.
No problem.
Are there any other questions for Sherry? So I think we'd like to do the business session of this meeting, which is the approval of the minutes of the June 13, 2019 meeting, the approval of the minutes of the April 11, 2019 meeting, and you remember perhaps that we had quorum issues and so did not have final approval of those last year, and also, as Sherry has requested, adoption of the fees that she's laid out and the budget for the Student Housing Corporation for fiscal 2021. Does anyone have any issues with that? Could I have a motion to approve those three altogether?
I'll move it. It's Robin.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I appreciate that. And so those are passed. And now I need a motion to adjourn the Student Housing Corporation meeting, after which we will come back to life as the Board of Trustees meeting. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. The Student Housing Corporation meeting is adjourned. Now, we will recommence as the Board of Trustees meeting. And again, welcome to everyone. If there's anyone who's just joining us for this, there has been no request for a public session. So the Board of Trustees will now conduct its 473rd meeting with a report from President Brown, and then a committee report from the Audit Committee, which is to be given by Richard Anderman. So I would just like to reiterate, in case any of the administration and faculty have joined us for this meeting, that the board is incredibly appreciative and admiring of the efforts by this administration and the faculty to so promptly and efficiently, and it seems to us smoothly, transition to an online school facility and schooling opportunity for the students. So congratulations to all, and thank you. And without more, I will turn this over to Dr. Brown.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Liz, and thank you for the recognition. I think everyone has indeed worked incredibly hard and, continues to do that. So it really should be no secret that this has probably been the most difficult and disturbing school year in memory, with really unfathomable and unprecedented decisions to make and challenges to face on a constant basis. At the college, we were able to carve out all of 2 weeks to shift the entire college, both instructional and administratively, to an online environment, 2 weeks to relocate our students, to evacuate the residence halls, and to orient all of our 8,000 students plus faculty to online instruction. So we did it, and I think the level of success that we were able to achieve, and that does not mean to imply there were not issues and continue to be that we are constantly addressing, but the success that we did achieve was really because of the close collaboration of our senior management team and the commitment and cooperation of the entire community, and especially the deep commitment of our faculty to their student success. The choreography was complex, but everyone really did adopt a can-do attitude, and fortunately, our IT division had the foresight to start preparation for this possibility in late February, and took the time to strengthen many of its back-end systems and servers and network elements, and that has really served us very well. So I just want to provide you with a few highlights of what was accomplished in that 2-week period. Over 500 staff members were provided with home access to our business systems through a special computer program, and they were taught how to use it in a quickly created training program. 200 students and staff members who did not have home computers or laptops were lent laptops from our own stockpile of 75 computers, and from a wonderful IT nonprofit in Texas. Could everyone put their phone on mute? Because I think we're getting a lot of interference. Thank you. We found a wonderful IT nonprofit in Texas that shipped and supplied us with the remaining 125 computers that we needed in order to reach out to those original 200 that needed computers. Thanks to a very creative, intensive, and collaborative effort, 275 students in 4 quite different design programs were provided with alternative ways to access the specialized software that they use in our campus studios and labs. According to a survey that we developed, faculty readiness to teach online was at 98% by the time classes began. The entire effort was supported by a continuous flow of communication, including a constant updating of our website and an IT help desk that diligently worked above and beyond to assist with all the inevitable bumps along the way. We did not empty the dorms entirely. There were 40 students who were unable to go elsewhere, and they remain in our dorms. We've moved them to co-ed hall and alumni halls, again, trying to maintain the social distancing, along with about 8 staff members. For over a week, a very reduced cadre of administrative staff reported to campus, handling the essential operational tasks. The Bursar's office, for instance, moved 1,000 students who were due refunds for a host of reasons unrelated to COVID-19, and they moved them from paper to electronic checks so that they could receive the funds they were expecting. Today, the campus is basically closed. We have public safety officers staffing the lobbies of the occupied dorms. Feldman, Hall, Dubinsky, Pomerantz, and Goodman also have 24/7 regular patrol of the buildings. Unless we expect special deliveries, such as critical equipment, we're still getting in computers or medications for the students who are still living on campus. The mailroom and the central receiving are basically closed. IT personnel come to campus only for emergencies. We've talked about getting Kaufman and Nagler ready for workers assigned to Javits. And while we're completing the cleaning so that we will be ready, if in fact we do not get word that people are coming, we will then revert to a bare bones rotating staff plan for that building as well. As you saw from the memo that I sent yesterday, we will operate exclusively online for the summer, and we are developing contingency plans to operate online for the fall should that become necessary. You know, like everyone else in the world, we live in a world of uncertainty. You already know from our discussion with the Student Housing Corporation budget that our budgets for next year are uncertain. Our approach with guidance from SUNY is to plan for the scenarios at different levels. We've said what we've presented here is the best case. We're assuming strong enrollment in the fall, and we're assuming that, you know, of course, based on the response of the admitted students in recent days. But, you know, it remains to be seen. We will hopefully be able to do the most critical of those renovation projects only because it's only smart to preserve the resources that we have in terms of the facilities. But we will, of course, have to accommodate the shortfall that's going to be created by the significant refunds of room fees. The worst case, of course, would be that we would not be able to house students in the residence halls in the fall. And although we think it is unlikely, we're considering actions that would be necessary should that play out and analyzing all the options for best and worst cases. Let's see, with both the Housing Corp and the college, we're developing a plan to manage spending reductions as much as possible given the lateness in the fiscal year, and of course looking through the entirety of fiscal year 2021. We will submit our plans next Monday to SUNY for their approval, and it will include limited hiring of personnel and the reduction of non-personnel spending across all categories. SUNY has assured us that state budget cuts are very likely as early as the end of April. We have signals from the city that we may see reductions in its funding as well. And while there will be federal funds from the Stimulus CARES Act, eligibility is complicated. We are reading all the fine print now. We're expecting further guidance from SUNY, but Sherry and her staff are going through it all very carefully. And we will have broader discussions once it's all developed more fully and we are clearer on exactly what we're entitled to and how we have to go about applying for it. As I indicated, we do have some promising signs in terms of enrollment in both our lower and our upper division programs. There's been an encouraging increase in the number of students who have committed to accepting our offer of admissions as compared to last year. And for those prospective students who we have admitted, but they might still be wavering, we will continue to hold our traditional admitted students weekend on the 25th and 26th of this month, only it's going to be virtual, of course, and there will be a whole suite of videos for students to choose from, as well as webinars and Q&A sessions and Google Chats. We've also gotten a very early response rate on that looks as if a number of students are going to participate, which I think is a good sign. Meanwhile, in an effort to alleviate some of the stress that our current students are experiencing, so, while we talk about having gone online and offering the students the instruction, for some it is a big adjustment, particularly for our art and design students, I would say. So we're offering the option of a kind of pass-fail system for up to 9 hours of coursework taken during this semester. Students would get a grade of S for satisfactory instead of a normal letter grade. And while this would not be calculated in their GPA, they would receive the appropriate credits on their transcript. The difference will be it will have to be evaluated if it will affect their financial aid in terms of academic progress, or if there are graduating students who plan to go to graduate school for whom that might be an issue. But we will look at it all on a case-by-case basis, and the students will have a choice about whether they take an S grade and which classes they will do that in. So when your world has been totally upended and you're struggling to make sense of it all, it is reassuring to be able to report on the continuing achievements of some of our alumni. So I just want to leave you with 2 good news pieces. Recently, 3 textile development and marketing alums, led by science and math professor Thean Skiros, won one of 5 Global Change Awards given by the H&M Foundation. This, of course, adds to FIT's growing prominence in the field of science and design. They came in first in their category among 5,900 entries from 175 countries. The project is called Werewolf, and they will receive a grant of 250,000 euros to keep developing their revolutionary biodegradable fibers infused with fibers infused with the DNA from protein-rich organisms such as jellyfish and oysters. So that is really very special. And FIT alumni are local leaders in a nationwide volunteer project to produce and deliver hospital-grade masks for frontline workers in the health emergency that is dominating our lives. The project is called Sew for Lives USA, and the New York chapter was founded by alumni in the New York vicinity. More than 5,000 masks have been made by a network of alumni, friends of FIT, families, and students here in New York State, and that's just here alone. I mean, it is a nationwide project. So that's all the good news I can muster, but I'm very proud of those two things. And if anyone has questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. Otherwise, I turn this back to Chairperson Peak.
Congratulations. I think it's good to have some good news. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Joyce, I do have a question, and you referenced it, and maybe I just missed. Maybe I just didn't get the details. But can you give us a sense of? It sounded like the admissions numbers were very good for the fall, and that most of the students are sticking with that and planning to come. Can you give us a sense of what admission numbers look like compared to last year?
Let me see if I can get a handle on that. Otherwise, I'll call on Catherine. But it seems that in our associate programs, we admitted 2,935 students. And as of yesterday, we had responses from over 1,048, so almost half. And last year at this time, we had heard from 689 students. Now, one of the things that I also think is helping is we have provided the opportunity for them to pay online. So last year that was not available, but still, if we're looking at social media as well, students seem very excited about having been admitted. And the virtual admitted student day that we're going to hold at the end of the month. So, obviously the 2,900 students were invited, and within hours, over 400 had responded. And we're also seeing good signs in our summer registration as well. We are a little down from last year, but we got over 1,000 who have registered actually as of last week. So we think we're on a good path, and of course we're going to have to let those students understand that everything is going to be online for summer. So at any rate, I think that gives you an idea.
Thank you.
Joyce, could you let us know how things are going with the continuing education program?
Yeah, we are working now to develop new kinds of programming that might, in fact, invite others to come in that we can then count on for courses. So, for example, we have a undertaking that we're calling the Workforce of the Future. So those are interesting kinds of offerings that people will sign up for, learning how to maneuver and navigate in the new digital world. So we have a couple of faculty members who have put together webinars that are brief, sort of teasers, and I think they had like 4,000 or 6,000 people sign up. We're actually not charging for these. It's an invitation, and it will lead to certificate programs for which people will register. We are also developing. We think there's a need and an opportunity for families to have things to do for their children who are home and not in school. So we are trying to develop interesting, creative kinds of things for children who are in the middle school as well as the high school areas, and we're going to launch those on June 1st. And we're expecting that there's going to be, a real interest on the parts of, one, the creative children, but also the families who would like to, have the students doing something interesting and worthwhile and instructive during the day. So those are just two of the things we're developing, along with having, a working group developing more and more offerings that we think will create a more robust continuing ed program.
Thank you, Joyce.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions for Joyce? Thank you. Now, Richard Anderman is going to give us an audit committee report.
Thank you, Liz. The audit committee met on March 11 of this year. In addition to me, Liz Peak and Deidre Quinn were in attendance, as were members of the college's administration and two representatives from KPMG. The purpose of the meeting was to have KPMG present their audit plan for the year. This is a requirement of the audit that we go through what they are planning to do, the timeline, the terms and areas of focus, and a review of changing best practices and standards issued by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board and the Financial Accounting Standards Board. The folks from KPMG reported that in connection with the fiscal year 2020 audit, there will be no significant changes in reporting requirements as they apply to the college. They did review some changes in fiduciary standards relating to fiduciary activities and leases, but those should not have a material impact on the college's financial statements. They also reviewed a number of higher education outlook reports, which covered many of the issues that we have been discussing within the board over the last couple of months. The committee then adjourned and went into an executive session with just representatives of KPMG. During the course of that executive session, KPMG once again reiterated their confidence in the finance group led by Sherry Delphi, and gave them high marks for their performance. And then we had a discussion of various issues relating to the success of enterprise and the kinds of challenges that are facing higher education, both as a result of the COVID-19 epidemic, diversity issues, and whatnot. And those are issues that the board, or at least the audit committee, has been encouraged to focus on going forward. So there were no surprises, no particular matters of concern or consideration, and the executive session adjourned. So that's our report.
So does anyone have any questions for Richard? By the way, an audit committee meeting with no surprises is pretty much what you want out of an audit committee meeting. So that was good news. Okay, we have now an action item, which is approval of the minutes of the 472nd meeting held December 10, 2019. Could I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Approve. Motion.
And second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, everybody. Does anyone have any other comments or questions they'd like to raise at this time? If not, we will conclude our open meeting and go into executive session. So I think I need a proposal to adjourn the Board of Directors meeting, and I think you all know that you're going to be calling in on a different number in a minute or two to access the executive session. So with that, I wish everybody who's signed on Godspeed and stay safe, stay well, and hopefully we'll be convening again in happier times.